Today we're making minty broccolini and almond pesto, which came out of a few things. One, a need to use up some broccolini that I had in my fridge. It's also a response to tired of basil pesto in my life, but that doesn't mean that you don't eat pesto the rest of the year. You just make it a little differently. So this takes kind of like the format of a pesto, but swaps everything out. So really the only similar ingredients to your classic basil pesto are garlic and olive oil. But it's still a pesto, as in like a pounded green thing that you're gonna toss with pasta, and it's gonna kind of taste like pesto. So, like I said, this is made with broccolini. Broccolini and mint are the green things in the pesto. Broccolini, when it's raw, is like snappy and kind of stringy. So we're gonna blanch it, and then we'll separate the broccolini into two parts. Part of it will go into the pesto, and part of it will get tossed with the pasta later on. So let's blanch our broc. So this is our pot of pasta water. Regular, just pot of water. We're gonna season it the way we would pasta water, which is to say very heavily. So I'm dropping one large bunch in. I'm gonna set a timer for 2 minutes. It's really just like seal in the brightness, tenderize the stalks a little bit, and get it cooked so that we're not eating raw broccolini in our pesto. So it's a pesto recipe. All of the ingredients that are in the pesto, the almonds, the pecorino, the broccolini, half are getting reserved and tossed through the pasta along with the blended pesto later on, so that you have like a very multi-textural eating experience, and it's not just like boring bite after boring bite. One of my qualms with pesto is like every bite tastes the same, and it can be really the world's greatest pesto, and after like 5 or 6 bites, you're kind of like, I get it. In this way, we get to have like a moment of broccolini and like a crunchy little almond and a nutty little piece of cheese, and it's all enrobed in pesto. It's just more dynamic. Okay, so another like minute here. This is a great tool to invest in your kitchen. It's called a spider, and it's just a big ass slotted spoon that's really good for fishing out blanched vegetables, or like if you cook eggs a lot, boiled eggs, pull them out of the water. You can use it for skimming the pasta out of a pot if you want to reserve, which we'll talk about later. So it's boiling. We're gonna check for doneness. We don't want it to be like super fibrous, but we want it to be still crunchy and juicy. I think we're good to go. Okay, so I have an ice bath, which is just cold water with ice. And I'm gonna plunge all of the broccolini right into it to stop the cooking. If you weren't to do this and you were to just leave the broccolini out like on your countertop, it would probably overcook. And even if it didn't overcook, it would turn like a drab army green color. And then your pesto looks like shit. So we're gonna let this just come down and cool for like 3 minutes. Okay, so we have some cold broccolini here that I'm just pulling out of the ice water and squeezing it out because we really want to get as much water out of it as possible. So the best thing to do is to lay it out on towels and like really pat it dry, super absorbent towels. So here's our blanched broccolini. I'm taking it over to my cutting board. I'm going to coarsely chop it. And just bearing in mind that some of these are gonna go into the pasta, and then we're gonna separate this into 2 piles. 3/4 of a cup of the broccolini stems and florets. And while we're over here on the cutting board, the only other thing we're gonna do is chop some of these roasted almonds. These are just roasted salted almonds. Mine are already roasted. If yours are raw, throw them in a 350-degree oven with a little oil and salt. So these I am chopping, and this is only half of the called for almonds in the whole pasta. These are the little texture pops for later on. So once these are coarsely chopped, we'll set them aside as well with the broccolini. So these are kind of like our add-ins. Then we move on to the pesto. So this is where all of the broccolini pesto magic happens. Like I said, not a traditional pesto, no basil in sight, no pine nuts, but it's really not that far off. We're gonna use almonds, so the rest of the roasted salted almonds, anchovies, so 4 oil-packed anchovies and 2 raw garlic cloves are all going in. And this is gonna make like a nutty garlic paste. Okay, so we have like this like nutty chovy garlic paste. Smells fucking phenom. Next, we're gonna add the reserved broccolini and mint. So gonna need a lot of mint. So I'm going to pick the leaves of a large bunch of mint such that there is one very packed cup of mint. So that doesn't mean like a loosely packed cup of mint. It means a tightly packed fuck ton of mint, basically. Think about how much basil goes into pesto. Also, could you use basil? Yeah. But also, I just believe that everyone should be cooking with mint in their savory dishes more frequently. So you'll see in a lot of my recipes, I'm pushing for it. That is a nicely packed cup of mint. You can't feel it, but it's dense. All right, so broccolini's in the food processor. Now we put the mint in. I'm gonna add, and I'm gonna eyeball this, but you can totally measure it, 1/2 cup of olive oil and a splash of white wine vinegar. Okay, and then we pulse. Okay, so see how it's nice and bright green? This color is because we shocked the broccolini, and so it retained its really vibrant greenness, which I think is kind of what you want when we're talking pesto. And then the other thing you will notice is that we haven't seasoned it yet, so I'm gonna do a little salt. And then you're gonna have to taste at this point and decide what it needs, knowing that the last step here is that we're gonna add an ounce of grated pecorino cheese. Pecorino is pretty salty. It's saltier than Parm. You could totally use Parm if you'd rather, or if you have it. I just think it's like fun to switch up the nutty, hard cheese in a pesto. Another pulse. Another taste. And that's the pesto. At this point, we're going to move back over to the stove because I'm gonna show you a cool way to toss pesto over your pot of pasta water so you can kind of like juggle all of the elements at once. It'll make sense in a second. This pot is the same pot that we blanched the broccolini in, and we just reserved the water, and it's a little green and gross, but it's fine. It's all going in the same place. Now I'm gonna drop 12 ounces of pasta in here. This recipe calls for short pasta, like short tubular-ish pasta. I'm using cavatappi. Honestly, you could use whatever you want. You could use spaghetti if you want to, but I just think a short pasta is nice because all the little broccolini florets can kind of get like caught in the spirals. So the next thing we're gonna do is get prepared for the pesto tossing moment. This recipe actually utilizes the pot of boiling water, basically like a double burner. And so instead of draining the water out, we're gonna lift the pasta up, add it to a large bowl, and set the bowl over the top of the pasta. And then the heat from the pasta pot is going to heat the pesto, and it will kind of like emulsify it into a nice sauce. So basically what you need to look for is a bowl that's wider than your pasta pot so that it can sit on top and it doesn't fall in. If it falls in, the whole thing doesn't work. This is a great fit. I'm just gonna transfer the pesto out of the food processor here into a little bowl so that we can take a look at how much we have. And then we're gonna start by adding some of the pesto, and we'll add more as needed until it feels like really nicely coated. I'm going to put like 2/3 of that into this bowl, and then we'll reserve the rest and add it as needed. And if we don't need it, then we have leftover pesto. Okay, let's check on our pasta. Whoa, that was a sick catch.
Finished.
It's finished?
Yeah.
It's not too al dente?
No.
Okay, it's finished. He just like, I threw it at him, he just goes. Okay, so here we go. We are using our spider, and we are just gonna take the pasta and drop it straight into the bowl of pesto. And you don't have to drain it too much. Like if there's water hanging off the bottom of this spider, great. Let it find its way into the bowl because we're gonna end up adding pasta water anyway. So we have our pasta, we've got some pesto in there. And at this point, I'm gonna turn the pot off below. We don't need to keep boiling the water. There's enough residual heat. And we're just gonna start tossing it. Okay, I can already tell that I want more pesto, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And then if it feels like it's really thick, you can always add some pasta water. That's looking good. Let's get a little bit of pasta water in here. Okay, so now that we feel like the pesto is like nicely sauced around the nudes, we're gonna add in the rest of the blanched broccolini, roasted chopped almonds, and then I have more pecorino cheese that I'm just gonna like crumble off into little bitsies. So just little nuggets, pecorino nugs. Okay, so the heat of the pot just kind of helped like warm everything up. We had blanched that broccolini, and so it's good to help take the chill off. So I'm just zhuzhing now. So I've added a little bit of white wine vinegar just to make it pop, and I added a bunch of salt. I'm just plating up some pasta over here. Just getting some pesto in a bowl. I'm gonna finish with a little more peck. I mean, and this is a very large portion for one, I would say, and there's still lots of pasta left in here. And I used 12 ounces. Delicious. The best part for me, with every noodle, you get a little crunchy, juicy broccolini moment and a crispy, crunchy almond, and it's just like way more interesting than a boring plate of pasta where every bite tastes the same.